pays to know Terry Mosher. This is one of the great iconic cartoons of all time in Canada, the day after the Separatist Party first took power in Quebec. The genius of this cartoon, of all cartoons by AISLIN, is he gets them down to one frame. It's really quite amazing. So anyways, I expressed some admiration for this piece, and before I knew it, I found it on my desk. Terry, is this for me?
Should I give it?
Yeah.
Good man.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I got something
This
else
is
after,
really
but
good.
anyway.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
I guess after 3 days, this is going to work, right? It's up. Well, okay. Second now. I love coming to IdeaCity and spending 3 days, so I drive here. And, you know, I've heard all about the business of Montreal, Toronto. There aren't really that many differences in this day and age. This would be Montreal. Surrounded by orange and white cones. This would be Toronto. Surrounded by orange and black cones. It's interesting that at the beginning of the sessions, they were talking about taking trains or whatever the hell they were, and we're going to be in Montreal in 38 minutes, you know, and yet we can't come up with a decent asphalt. It's stuff like that kind of keeps me in business. I like older stuff. I'm not a reactionary, but I like to look at older stuff when it was really well made. Look at this thing. Well, no, this is sort of a bilingual sign that we share in both cities. But look at this. Look at that. It was built 125 years ago. Still the same rocks. Still the same sort of wonderful construction. And it's still standing. And it looks like a thing that's going to last for another 300 or 400 years. Why can't we do something like that as opposed to the stuff falling apart within 20, 30, 40 years? And my favorite building in the world is in Kyoto, Japan. It's a Zen monastery. It's a wonderful place. I've sat on those benches there, and that was built in 1261. Sure, they've had to replace bits and pieces of wood and this, that, and the other, but in effect, it's existed for all that time. A wonderful sort of simple construction. And an interesting thing happened when I visited that monastery. I got talking to a monk, and he was really puzzled about what it was I did. I was trying to explain to this Zen monk what a cartoonist is, and he looked a little puzzled. But after a while, he said, "Let me get this right. What you do is you sit and you watch, and you wait for something to happen, and then you do a drawing about it." I said, "Yeah, that's what I do." And that's what I've done for 50 years as a cartoonist. Sit, watch, react to something. Let me give you an example of that. The other day, the Tories. So what did I do? And like Alan Alda was saying, I often watch the television with the sound off, right? Just so I can see the expressions and so on. I'm looking, and suddenly I said, "Whoa, wow, this is great." That's what I do. And then I send it to the newspaper. They send me a check. Newspaper checks aren't bouncing just yet. And there you go. That's what I do. That's my life. And it sort of started out that way. And I bet this is me drawing caricatures, portraits of tourists on Rue de Trésor 50 years ago this summer. And I didn't know really what I was going to do. I knew two things that I could draw, and I came up with kind of funny ideas. That's all I really knew. Nothing else seemed to work all that well for me. So I would draw like portraits, make people look a little better than they actually were. More fun drawing cartoons of people with charcoal. I could draw these things in 2 or 3 minutes and get a few bucks for them. And also sketches of well-known personalities at the time, like Bob Dylan here, and people enjoyed sort of buying that sort of thing. Then a guy walked down the street, and it kind of changed my life. He was from Boston, and he said to me, "Could you draw a caricature of Lyndon Johnson in his underwear. I said, yeah, I can do that. I mean, Lyndon Johnson with the nose and the hair and the ears and so on. So I did it right away. I did this little pen sketch for him. He said, can I have that? I said, yeah, I guess. He said, I'll send you a check. Sure you will. Yeah, all right. He went back to Boston, and he owned a coffee house. And he put the Lyndon Johnson sketch on an ad for a band called the Peanut Butter Conspiracy that were going to be appearing. So here it was. And he sent me a check for $50. And I began to think at that point, can I actually make a living out of drawing these silly things? You know, these silly little things. So I hitchhiked to New York, met a fellow by the name of Paul Krasner, who was the editor of The Realist. Some of you might know about him. He sent me over to a rock and roll magazine that had just started called Cheetah. And they immediately commissioned me to do a center spread of a calendar with all kinds of characters, and I spent quite a bit of time doing this. I had no idea how smart it was for me to go to New York first, because when I came back to Canada, editors were so impressed with the fact I'd had something published in New York. So it was sort of a lot of serendipity, really, at the beginning. So there I am on the street. I've picked up a few things in 50 years. That's me in the hat. I don't wear white socks anymore. But within 2 years, this is summer of '60, within 2 years, I was doing covers for Time magazine. So it went but also the luck of being in Montreal. Imagine the situation in Montreal, all this stuff, Trudeau was getting started. Oh, wait a minute, I wanted to say that, you know, the caricature of Lyndon Johnson eventually led, believe it or not, to me getting the Order of Canada 35 years later. I mean, and I'm still kind of stunned by that. But I had a great advantage in that the people I was drawing at the time were really interesting, the politics in Canada. Here, this was an election handbook for Maclean's magazine of Pierre Trudeau dancing with Stanfield. Peter C. Newman called me up and said, I loved that cartoon. I said, yeah, and I like drawing the knees. He hadn't seen it, them kneeing each other in the crotch. A lot of that sort of thing. But the foundation of the Parti Québécois by René Lévesque was Gilles Grégoire, the Flq Crisis. I was sent to draw FLQ trials. From a kid who was just on the street, this was pretty exciting stuff. The election of the Parti Québécois in 1976, Moses just showed you the cartoon. The first referendum. Mayor Jean Drapeau, a very wily guy, telling René Lévesque he'd be gentle because he said he'd cooperate with him a little bit. Quite a reaction to that cartoon. But I was getting sexual references into cartoons that had never happened before in English language press. In Montreal, I guess it was allowed, and a lot of sexual references. Here, for example, it was a news item that married women have sex 1.57 times a week. And he's asleep, and she's saying, well, that was 0.57. People were loving this sort of thing. Hold on now. Also, the characters at the time, that's me with Leonard Cohen drinking in a bar. He was getting started at basically the same time. This was Cohen's all-time favorite cartoon I did of him as Ratso in Midnight Cowboy. Mordecai Richler was a character on the scene. So you could suddenly fluking into all of these astonishing people and getting to know them who were being so creative. Moses had gone to Toronto by that point, I think. Then my newspaper sent me to Russia for the Canada-Russia hockey series. And this is within a few years of just getting started. Very, very exciting. I've always loved hockey, and the newspapers let me run with that. I mean, this is perhaps one of my best-known cartoons of the Habs being the new religion in Montreal with a Habs jersey on the Montreal cross. When the Dalai Lama came to Montreal, we gave him a Habs sweater, not some religious token. And even when we're not as good as the Leafs, I mean, there's always sort of a hockey cartoon, something people are talking about all the time. Don Cherry is a gift to cartooning. Tim Horton clearing the puck out of his own net, and he looks down and he sees a donut, and the rest is history, you know? Fun, this stuff. 2006, I was very proud of the women. Won the Olympics, the men didn't. And so I drew this drawing of This girl, she shoots, she scores, very determined. I was very fond of this cartoon. And what do you know, sometimes life imitates art. This is my 13-year-old grandchild playing bantam hockey. Stand up, Sid. There she is. And the gifts just kept on coming. Brian Mulroney, I thought after Levesque and Trudeau and Drapeau were gone, I'd have to quit. But Brian Mulroney, what a gift he was, and his mouth always getting him in trouble. The whole free trade issue. And he kept on giving, the gift that kept on giving, Brian Mulroney, you remember when the German gave him $200,000, but then the German said I actually had $500,000 for him. So I had Brian saying, I'm going to sue the German for the money he didn't give me. Brian's a wonderful kind of character. Jacques Parizeau, Elvis Presley sold more records in Quebec than anywhere in the world per capita, and so when he reemerged, I drew him as sort of Parizeau being alive. Jean Chrétien dancing with a bunch of Arabs, singing Havana Gila. Stephen Harper, nobody had the courage to tell him he couldn't sing, Mike Duffy. The one time I envied the Toronto cartoonists was during the regime of Rob Ford. I really envied these guys down here, Theo Moudakis and Brian Gable and a bunch of them, just going at this guy. It was wonderful. For just the shortest period of time I wanted to be in Toronto. But then you came around to form and elected another white guy in a suit, boring white guy. So I'm glad I stayed in Montreal. I mean, I have wonderful mayors in Montreal. Jean Drapeau, when he said the Olympics could no more have a deficit than a man can have a baby, and he's calling Morgenthaler the abortionist. The Olympics themselves, doing sketchbooks all through the thing. 50 years I've been doing this stuff. This is when the cones really came into our lives in Montreal, and so the mayor started asking, was it good for you? Our current mayor is Denis Coderre. Now look at that face. Look at that face. Who do you see? What do you see? I'll show you what I saw after a while. He looks exactly like Fred Flintstone. Amazing. Here's another one. He had a campaign against dogs, and dogs sort of urinating on him and that sort of thing. A favorite story about how the business has changed. I drew the Queen here in 1973. The reaction was stunning. The newspaper had anything like it, because I was sort of slightly critical of the Queen. Nobody in the English press had ever been critical of the Queen before. Hundreds and hundreds of letters, the Monarchist League coming after me. Moved to the present day, or 2008, and things have changed. That was a letter from the press secretary of the Queen, not for publication, demanding to know what the point was. But then 2008, the Obamas are brand new to protocol. And what does Michelle Obama do? She touches the Queen, right? Well, what does the Queen do in a dignified way? She touches her right back. Very nice. And yet when I saw this on YouTube, I couldn't resist drawing this. So I have a lot of fun doing this. I mean, but the thing is, there was not one letter of complaint. So times have changed. They expect more raucous humor, and we've kind of established that. I'm going to tell you a kind of an offbeat story here, but it hasn't always been wonderful. In 1988, I had just not recovered, but I had quit drinking, dealing with alcoholism and so on. And it's not just you quit drinking on Friday and everything's okay by Tuesday. It doesn't work that way. There's always residue, relationships, this, that, and the other. You have to deal with one thing and another, financial in particular. And so I was desperately broke in 1988. And I'd always taken pride on the fact that I drew my own cartoons. I wasn't illustrating anybody. I wasn't doing commercial work. And that was a real sort of point of pride. They were always my ideas that I was putting out there. And I lived or died with those ideas. But this guy walks into my office in 1988, and he says to me, I can make you a fast $5,000. This is a very rich guy, by the way. A fast $5,000. The Bay are looking for cute bears to promote something called the Care Bears. And if you remember, there were these white, fluffy bears, and they had, God, terrified of doing something like this. So I thought maybe he'd give me a kill fee. He said, oh, you'll get $5,000. Maybe he'll give me a kill fee, and they won't use them. So I did some rough sketches. Cute bears with hula hoops. Jesus Christ, shoot me, Skating. Oh, God. Jeez, I didn't know if I could live with this. The family. So the guy came and he said, these are great. I think the Bay is going to love them. I said, I was afraid of that. I said to him, I actually drew a bear really having fun, and I hope my granddaughter forgives me this, but I actually drew a cartoon of a bear really having fun. And he said, can I see it? And I said, sure. It's a bear jerking off. Right? He went nuts. He loved the thing. He said, I have to have that. I want to put it on nightshirts and give it to all my friends. I've got to have that cartoon. What's it going to cost me? And I said, well, how about $5,000 and I don't have to do the goddamn Bay work? He said, you got a deal. So a bear jerking off saved my integrity. Present day, welcome to the zoo. I mean, it's just been phenomenal for cartoonists the last little bit. Ridiculous but very sad stuff, all the shootings. I have the solution. 93% of shootings in the United States are with handguns. I came up with a solution. That would work. And of course, Hillary and the man. Hillary is finally sort of worn through, although they say she's going to run for mayor of New York. There's our man, Donald Trump. That's all, folks. But here, the interesting thing is, my angle was more, how are Canadians going to deal with this? And my first thought was, keep calm and Canada on, And maybe the new legislation won't hurt, legalizing marijuana, charge GSC, good shit tax. But a lot of us have forgotten how to roll joints. In any case, young Mr. Trudeau, despite what Mr. Fraser, what was said before, I thought he actually handled the Trump thing pretty well. I mean, especially with that handshake and grabbing the shoulder first and twisting him and Trump looking so surprised. At the same time, what he didn't realize, he was also wearing a sterile glove. Obama was, here's an interesting anecdote for you that very few people, Obama was in Montreal the other day, and they had a drink and dinner at a very good restaurant, Joe Beef's. And the owner of the restaurant asked Obama, he said, do you think there's any chance of Michelle Obama running? And all he did was laugh, didn't answer. So, missing the Obama, and which one, right? Could be. I'm having a 50-year exhibition at the Mccord Museum. If any of you ever get there, love to see you. They've done a beautiful job of displaying my work with interconnected stuff, with iPads, with sort of follow-up cartoons. Very proud of that exhibition. The most popular cartoon in the show, when Miley Cyrus did the thing, I drew Madame Marois. And this has been the most popular cartoon in Quebec in 10 years. In fact, Le Devoir ran a photograph on the front page of the newspaper in the French press about an English cartoonist of me with Madame Marois there. 700 people showed up at the opening. It was great. Bob and Arlene, Wendy Mesley did an interview. It was great. Bob and Arlene Ray. Bob actually, despite cartoons I've done of Bob, he wrote a very nice introduction for this book. I'm going to be signing him upstairs at the bookstores and the party later. It's Trudeau to Trudeau, 50 Years of AISLIN Cartoons. So there you go. Trudeau, to Trudeau, 50 years of cartoons. But Moses, I have something for you. In addition to the softcover book, book collectors love this stuff, so they advised me that I should print 300 hardcover books. It's beautifully done by the best printer in Canada. Only 300 have been printed. They've been signed and numbered. They're on sale for $100 each. But I think I'd probably buy the softcover anyway myself. But anyway, Moses, I got a signed copy of this for you.